Okay, we are ready to go.
All right, welcome everyone. Let's get started with this March 8th, 2021 Committee of the Whole meeting for Millburn School District Board of Education. We could have roll call, please.
We're actually starting our special meeting
Thank you.
That's what.
for our special meeting, March 8th, 2021. Mr. Coleman,
Here?
Mr. Gray,
Here.
Mr. Guziak,
Here.
Mrs. I,
Here.
Mr. Murphy, Mr. Pederini, Mr. Quinones,
Here.
All right, welcome everyone. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment?
No.
So our action items are pretty simple in this special meeting. We need to decide if we want to hire Autumn Elrod as the Millburn Middle School Assistant Principal for the 2021-22 school year.
And I would add, for the purpose of the record, at the rate of
I'm sorry, Jason. I'm not able to hear you. I would imagine others aren't either.
Okay. I just said to add to the motion a salary for Autumn of $92,000.
Okay. And this is the middle school. What's I thought we had an assistant principal for the middle school.
Yes, Adam Rollins is currently
Right.
the assistant, and next year he is moving in to take Elizabeth Keefe's position as
Right.
Director of Special Services.
Right.
Elizabeth
Okay. Again, you broke up a little bit. I'm sorry.
So Elizabeth is retiring at the end of this month.
Right.
So Adam is going to take Elizabeth's place, and Autumn will take Adam's place.
Okay. Am I incorrect that when we were going through all the discussions that Adam was going to have a dual role, that we were not going to need to hire an assistant principal?
For the last 2 months of this year is what we were talking about. So yes, your memory serves you well, but that was just for the end of this year.
Okay. All right. Is that the understanding of the other board members? Can we find out?
Yes, that was my understanding.
Okay. Mine as well. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Someone want to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to hire Autumn Elrod as MMS Assistant Principal for the 2021-2022 school year in the contract amount of $92,000.
Second.
All right. Do we have any further discussion on this question? Okay. Roll call, please, Veronica.
Mr. Coleman,
Yes.
Mr. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Guziak,
Yes.
Mrs. I,
Yes.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
Mr. Quinones.
Yes.
The motion passed.
Do we have
Thank
a
you.
salary for this summer school?
Yes, salary for the, before I go that, I'd like to invite Autumn to meet the board at the next board meeting at the end of March on March 29th. So you can put a name with a face and start to get to know her.
There's a lot of good feedback about her out on the internet, at her school in Belvedere there. And
Yeah,
there's a lot of very favorable feedback, so.
they're happy for her, but they are not happy that she's leaving. So their losses are gain. Good timing. The summer school coordinator, I would like to hire Carissa Berg has agreed to take that position at a rate of $5,000.
Is she currently affiliated with the school?
She is currently teaching math at 7th grade. She's a teacher, full-time teacher, and this would be over and above her current duties.
Got it.
So this is the first step in starting the summer school program, and we'll have more discussion about that later tonight.
What does a school, summer school coordinator do? Other than coordinate summer school? Like, what does that mean?
I can pull up the job description.
I'm just curious, like, what that role is versus,
No,
you
it's a
know,
good question.
a principal or assistant principal.
A principal or assistant principal could do it. It's a lot of work, especially between now and the end of the school year. So we have to come up with a funding plan. You know, how are we gonna fund it? And we'll present that to the board. And I'll be helping with that.
Okay.
We will have to come up with a brochure for parents. So you have to recruit teachers to teach the classes. You have to come up with what kind of classes that we want to be offering,
Okay.
match the teachers, and then send the brochure out to the parents and get registrations, and then collect all the money if we do charge for that. And organize the teachers, schedule, you know, put schedules together, put kids into classes.
So it's more logistical in nature versus like creating
Very.
the curriculum or the
Curriculum.
academic portion of it.
Yeah, the academic portion, there'll be some of that, but more, this person would be more of the logistics, correct?
Got it. Okay.
Because I just don't have time to do it, and neither do the other administrators, because we're trying to, starting something new like this is a ton of work.
Okay.
So, having done it in the past,
But quite in the past, right? I mean,
15 years ago,
Yeah.
yeah. I
so
was-
I think that's the difference here is hasn't been done in quite some time. and so
Right, not at Millburn or,
That's important.
so it's gonna be a little bit more this year, because there's precedent because we've done it before in our community, but it's not like we did it in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a lot. But a good experience for Carissa, who's interested in leadership and interested in administration, so this is a very good experience. I appreciate it when I did it now 15 years ago. Seems like it was yesterday.
So Jason, how long has it been since we've had summer school session?
I don't know what Millburn ended it. That's a good question. I think it
Well,
was.
before I came.
Yeah, 13 years ago-ish.
Yeah.
It kind of
Okay.
fizzled out. Fewer and fewer parents over the years were interested in the summer school programs that we were offering. They're more interested in like a camp. They needed more of a
Yeah.
full day program, so fewer people were available to take classes, to bring your kids in from 8 o'clock to noon or 9 till noon, whatever the hours were. So it just kind of got tired and fizzled out here.
Now, is this something that could be covered by a government grant due to like,
Our,
the need to do this to make up for COVID and
so our plan,
missed hours?
yes, so our plan is to use ESSER's money, the ESSER's 2 money. I believe there's gonna be an ESSER's 3, that's the education, something grant, stimulus money, basically. So we have 182,000, I think, Dr. Johns, is what you quoted.
182, 186, something like that.
Somewhere in that range, from the ESSER's 2 that we can use for this. We've already used it for things like air purifiers, or planning on using it.
No, I
We have
already,
any-
I already
We
quoted
spent-
it that way.
Yeah, we spent
Even though we
money a
haven't
few
written the
times.
grant.
we've spent that money, but, certainly a big chunk of it can go to this summer school program to offset that for our parents.
But then we
So-
can also use the Title I funds as well, or large chunk of the Title I funds
Big chunk.
too. We'll just have to amend that budget. but-
Yep.
So how do we know that there's going to be the demand for summer school? It being like a 3 hour, I think it's 3 hours, right?
3 hours.
A 3 hour program per day. So I mean, I could see it if it was like 7 hours, 8 hours, right? Because then that's, you're taking care of the child for the full day.
Correct.
But 3 hours still forces all the stuff that we're going through now. So
Correct.
do we know that there's gonna be the demand for it?
I don't know, but people have been asking about it, so people are curious about it.
Okay,
This is gonna be academic in nature for the most part. There will be some other fun enrichment classes to go with it. But our main purpose is to extend that school year because parents are asking, hey, my child is falling behind, or they're worried about falling behind, and this is a way to get that educational piece in the summer. That's our primary goal,
yeah.
but we'll also have some other fun classes.
Is it an all or nothing thing? Or can we scale it, right?
Yes.
Scale it down, scale it up.
Right.
Are
So-
there some costs involved? Like, we're in for 25K regardless of whether we have 1 kid or 200 kids.
No, I think it's scalable to some degree.
Okay,
The way we've worked it in the past, again, we're preliminarily talking about this.
yeah,
So, let me just go, I think this is a good time to go over this anyway. But, we're planning on a 3-week session in June and possibly a 2-week or a 3-week, and the last week of July, first week in August. So one would be more of like an extension of the school year. The kids would get a week off and then they start right back up with summer school. And then we have 4 weeks off, and then we start with 2 weeks of kind of a jump start program going into the fall to get the kids back in the groove.
yeah.
So that's our plan. It's scalable in that in order for a class to go, it's usually 10 kids minimum. We make it work with 8 or 7
Mhm.
mostly. It'll be fine, but in the past, we kind of had that target of 10 kids. So if there's only 5 kids who sign up for a section or class, it won't run.
Okay,
It'll just be canceled, and the kids will either have to do something else or they can stay home. That's what I'm anticipating, and that'll judge how much money that it will cost us.
okay,
If
got it.
so we're offering free transportation, or we're planning to offer free transportation. That's gonna be up to the board. And also very low cost, if any, and probably on a sliding scale. So we may say, okay, it's $25 per class, per session, which is pretty low.
yeah,
And if you can't pay, that's okay, because we know some people are really running tight budgets, but
Yeah.
some people can't. So if we can offset some of the costs
right,
and still get the kids interested and keep the costs low and make some of it fun and some of it academic. Not that academic isn't fun, but
I understand.
we want the kids to be, we want to be serious about learning
Okay,
as much as that goes too.
The other thing too, with the ESSERS grant money, that is the new money that we've just gotten, and there may be more in this latest thing that
Yeah, we
Congress
don't.
just passed, but who knows what's in there.
Right.
What was it,
Yeah,
600
there
pages or something?
definitely is more.
Yeah, I'm sure there is more, it's just a matter of
It's just a-
how they're gonna identify we have to use it, but the money that we know that we're getting that is already allocated to us, we have until September 30th of 2023 to spend it. So if we end up having to cancel, the first session or the second session or whatever, because we don't get enough students, we still have time to spend that money the following summer.
okay.
So probably the following 2 summers.
Yep. So our next meeting with I've got a committee of teachers who are interested in kind of talking about what we should do and how to get going on this. Our next meeting's Thursday. So I'll know more after Thursday. Will it be a 3-week and a 3-week, or a 3-week and a 2-week? Because what I'm really concerned about is burning out our teachers in the summer.
Yeah,
They gonna need a break at some point, and so, that and cost and everything, trying to balance all of that.
yeah.
we'll see what happens.
So is there like a proposed go, no-go decision?
Date,
Yeah,
I'd say June 1st.
June 1st, okay.
All right, does somebody wanna call a motion on this?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the summer school coordinator position to be paid $5,000.
Second.
We've had a good discussion. Are there any other questions, comments, concerns about this? Okay. Roll call, please, Veronica.
Mr. Quinones,
Yes.
Mr. Coleman,
Yes?
Mr. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Guziak,
Yes.
Mrs. Hyde,
Yes.
Mr. Murphy.
Yes.
The motion passed.
And our third order of business, the asbestos abatement contract for $35,000.
We actually received 3 proposals ranging from 35,200 up to 74,550. The consultant had estimated the cost was gonna be somewhere between 50 and 60,000. They're very comfortable with this contractor, and they'd be available to come in the afternoon of the 19th after the students leave, start setting up the, basically where they, seal it off from the rest of the building, and they put in the negative air pressure, or the fans to create negative air pressure, and all the other things that have to go into that asbestos removal. And they're planning to be finished then that Friday of spring break. So hopefully, if everything goes well, there'll be nothing occurring once students come back after spring break. If for some reason there are, it's still gonna be set up in a manner that it's still safe for people to be in the building. But as much as we can when we do asbestos removal, I like to have people out of the building as much as possible, just because of, a lot of people have, fears about the fact that I'm gonna get sick and I'm gonna be exposed and all those kind of things. I worked through the last time they did it, and they took the stuff right by my door, so I was fine with it. But it's a different, if you're not used to and don't understand the process, it can be a little unnerving. And then information will go out to parents and staff tomorrow, just notifying them of the project if the board approves it tonight.
And Dr. Johns, about how many square feet is this?
That entire lower level, so there's 6 classrooms, and a hallway. I don't know if I have the square feet.
So
What do you
6
think?
classrooms, what are they, about?
What, about
400
700 or
square feet?
800 is classroom, and then the hallway, so you've got
Say
probably 6,000 square feet probably,
Okay.
so it's not bad.
Yeah, so 580 something square foot.
This is a much better
I won't
price than
do
we
it
got
for
for
that.
summer.
You wouldn't do it for that?
No.
I would do these styles for that.
No, no experience.
Yeah, the hardest part is that the actual asbestos is in the mastic or the glue
Yeah,
that holds the tiles
right.
to the floor, so the tiles pop up real easy because they
Yeah.
had so much water in there, but
I know.
It's that nasty.
But they've got to grind all the
Yeah.
asbestos, the mastic off
Yeah.
the concrete. And then they'll have to they'll do several air tests, once they get everything cleaned up to make sure there's
Yeah.
no asbestos airborne in there before they even,
So,
start to open things back up.
last time we met, we said it was assumed that the mastic has it, right?
Yeah, the testing
Based
found,
on
yes,
the
it did.
year, the age, and, okay, but it was tested and it was confirmed?
Yes,
Okay,
and that's why we went ahead and went forward with the proposal.
yeah,
And the
okay.
assumption still that insurance will be covering this?
Yeah.
Okay. What's our deductible?
2,500.
Okay.
So we've already gotten the deductible back just from the repair on the coil.
Got it.
Because that was 2,600 and something was the cost to replace that coil in the unit ventilator. So, and then we'll have some plumbing bills and other things going to it. And then once we get through this, once we start going through this piece, then we'll start discussing with the, insurance company and the, restoration company, replacement, flooring. That'll be the next thing that we'll talk about. And then other than that, it's just a few ceiling tile, the base mold that goes, the rubber vinyl mold that goes around the edges will all have to be replaced because that has to come up in order to get the tile up. I think that's about it. I don't think there really was. And then I said ceiling tile, so really there wasn't much there that got destroyed.
There's not much down there.
No, there's not much down there.
Good thing.
Yeah. Well, actually, the one room had a lot of stuff, but it's the one that got the least amount of water.
Right. The stuff was okay.
Yeah. And even the books and things we had up on pallets so that, you know, we only had maybe an inch of water in there, so it didn't. And even checking the bottoms of the boxes that were on top of the pallet, the water didn't soak through the boxes, so they stayed dry. So whatever we did was a good, you know, we did a good job on that. Just took a while to figure out that the water was coming from the unit ventilator as opposed to outside.
Can you get a motion on this asbestos abatement?
I'd like to make a motion to award the asbestos abatement contract to Kinsale Contracting Group Incorporated in the amount of $35,200.
Second.
Are there any further comments or questions before we go? A roll call, please.
Dr. Johns, I may have missed it. Did they give you an estimate of how long it would take? They think spring break will do it?
Yes, that's what they're telling us.
Okay, thanks.
Mr.
Roll call.
Murphy,
Yes.
Mr. Quinones,
Yes.
Mr. Coleman,
Yes?
Mr. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Guziak,
Yes,
Mrs. Hyde.
Yes.
The motion passed.
Okay, motion passed, and that's all we have on the agenda.
Need a motion to adjourn.
Yes. Motion to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.
What makes this meeting, why did we have to have a special meeting for these particular topics?
We're
Good
approving
question.
money.
No, any action, the board cannot take any action on a committee meeting.
Oh, okay.
So the committee meeting cannot, the way it's set up, it's a committee of the whole. Some boards meet once a month, and they'll have a finance committee and a buildings and grounds committee and a personnel committee, or different types of committees that could meet separately. This board's tradition is to meet as committee of the whole, so everybody gets the same discussion. There's pros and cons to each, just the way our school district is chosen. So
But decisions can't be made during those committee meetings. Got it. Okay.
So no action's taken, it's just discussion, and then to have action, you can call a special meeting, or you can call a special meeting any day of the week, but it's not easy to get
Fair.
7 people together other than these nights, so. We try not to do it unless it's a timing issue.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, good question.
Let's open our regular committee of the whole meeting for Millburn School Board District 24. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Coleman,
Here?
Mr. Gray,
Still here.
Mr. Guziak,
here,
Mrs. Hyde,
Here.
Mr. Murphy,
Here.
Mr. Pederini, Mr. Quinones,
Here.
All right, we have already done the Pledge of Allegiance. Are there any additions or information for discussion? No. No additions? All right, so let's go on with our first order of business. The first reading of the board policies.
I would like to point out 7.345, the use of educational technologies, student data privacy and security. That is a new, I think that was created last summer or fall by press. But that one's completely new, and it helps us comply with what's called SOPA, the Student Online Privacy Protection Act. And SOPA is going to end up costing us some cash because we will be having to buy software that will help us comply with that. Basically, what SOPA does is it requires the district to publish on our website to parents any contracts that we have with third-party vendors where kids would go online and provide any information. Identifiable information could be an email, so typically to log into any website, Seesaw, for example.
Yeah.
The district is providing rosters and emails, so they have that data. So it's Seesaw's responsibility to make sure that they are not selling that data or that they're protecting the student privacy. So we have to go through on all of our apps, which will be in the probably 400 or 500 range-ish when we're all said and done.
That's a bunch.
It's a bunch. We will have to catalog them, have a process for evaluating them, and post online every contract if we have contracts with them or not, and then the ratings, they're also rated on how they comply with SOPA. So we will get all that information and all of that gets pushed out. It'll just be linked on in our website, but we have to purchase that software, and we're working with a company called Learn Platform that will help us do that. And that'll save us tons and tons of time, because they have some of these contracts already in the system from other school districts. We just need to send it, have them sign it, post it.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's still gonna be, hundreds of hours of labor for us, and it's due, if that is done by July 1st.
Oh.
So this is a big project.
What if a teacher decides to use something just in her classroom?
Can't.
They can't.
So it's
Unless
gonna-
you take it through the platform.
So, right, there's a request process that it would go through the platform, and somebody in the tech department, whether that's me or another curriculum person or one of our tech specialists, who would approve that, or the team of us would approve it and let them use it, but it would have to be posted then that we're using it and go through that process and approval. So this software helps us do that, because right now, sometimes teachers will go and find something that's really cool, and then somebody else will want it, and pretty soon, some people are using it, some people aren't. It creates some inconsistencies in what we're doing, so. There's good and bad to everything.
And even if it's a free program they're using, it still has to go through all this?
Yep. That's correct. And we're still learning about some of the nuances of this, so we're not, do you have to, if it's a website, do you have to do it, or is it just through our apps, through our system, our management system? Because we have a system that manages, we have managed iPads, so every iPad is managed through a central hub. So any app that's pushed out goes through that hub, so we can control what is available to kids and teachers.
And if they use something that doesn't collect any, or doesn't require a user account, that still has to go through all this?
Correct.
Is this?
Yes, it's massive. It's a massive undertaking, and it's one of those unfunded mandates that really is irritating, that has a good intention behind it. We all want our privacy to be secure and our kids' information. I really don't think it might help a little bit, but that information could still be, still out there.
Yeah.
This is just showing, and I don't know how many parents are gonna go through and look at all 500 to determine, or anybody. But it does provide some accountability. It's just too bad that we have to spend, every district in the state has to spend so much money trying to become compliant with this, so. It's one of those that I understand why, and it's a good reason, just a lot of work.
And this is a federal law too.
The federal is called COPA,
So SOPA's just Illinois.
SOPA's Illinois.
And I guess the feds required the states to adopt something, right?
I don't know.
Usually they do, but who knows?
I'm just learning about all of this.
All right. Anything else?
Nope.
So we will have a couple of people read through these carefully, but if you want to skim through some of these, especially if they look like something you should take it, the links are there. And come back with more questions next time if you have them. District goals and updates.
Okay, so district goals update goes in line with the superintendent evaluation process that we're going to talk about tonight, and the tool that Brendan started, Denise put together last week. So we'll go over that. But I want to show you what I've done with the goals. So we had 4 priorities, 4 district goals that we put together at the beginning of the year. And share them on my screen. There you go. So these are the goals draft that we had at the last fall and talked about what we should be focused on this year as a board. And this is all part of our communication process so that we know, hey, this is where we think we're headed this year. This is what we think we should focus on. And we have that conversation with the board and with me. And then we also have that conversation sometimes at the same time, sometimes after, sometimes before, with the administration. And the administration may tell me, hey, Jason, I think we really need to focus on reading next year. Our reading scores are way down. And then I would come to the board and say, do you think that this is the information that I've got? Do you think we should be focusing on reading next year? And the board would likely say, yeah, I think we should be focusing on reading. Hopefully. So it just helps us focus and communicate. But if I came to the board and said, I think we should focus on reading, but the board really said, you know what, we don't care about reading that much, Jason. We really think math is the thing that's most important for our kids. We want to be known as the math school. It would flip that priority just a little bit and say, okay, then I would know where you guys are coming from and where I'm coming from, and we can have that discussion. So we're all on the same page. So that's the process. That it's never perfect and never that easy, but that's what the purpose of this process is from my perspective and from what I've learned from the Illinois Association of School Board trainings that I've gone to with school board members, and what we're trying, ideally what we're trying to get to. And then it goes into evaluation. So the evaluation piece at the end of the year and throughout the year is saying, okay, so how are we doing as an organization moving through this? And everything as an organization flows through the superintendent. So if the organization isn't having success, I'm not, and neither is the board, and vice versa. So we want to make sure that everybody's on the same page and that we're actually moving and accomplishing what we set out to do. Or not. And then we have a discussion about that. Why not? What can we do? Do we need to push that to next year? Maybe we didn't have time this year because COVID hit. So all those goals are put aside, or maybe we, for whatever reason. So that's this process. So my idea, we have priority 1, priority 2, student learning, priority 3, curriculum, priority 4, safety, and 5, finance. My thought is to go and present in more in-depth one of these each meeting for the next 5 meetings. So if that's okay with the board, the principals are ready to present on priority 1 tonight what we've been doing with social and emotional health of students and staff, and go into a little more details, and then you can ask questions. If we did all 5 at one night, I think it would be too much.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'd like to do that, and then we can always jump back, and if you want to see anything else that triggers your thought process when we go through this, I'd be happy to get more information for you or look into something else too. But that's my thought.
So I just have a quick question on that. Oh, sorry, Brendan, were you trying to say something?
Go ahead, Denise.
Thank you. My only question on that is are we still planning on trying to do the superintendent evaluation at our next meeting? Because if we are, then we'll just need to push information out to see what's been accomplished towards those other priorities before that meeting.
So that is the good question then.
Because over the next 5 meetings, we're talking about May?
May.
The end of May. So, where's our calendar? And our calendar, when do we usually evaluate the superintendent? I thought it was June anyhow.
Yeah,
Yeah, but we talked about accelerating it so that we could
Yes.
plan out the 2022,
right.
2021, 2022.
So
Okay.
I'm fine either way. If you want to, we can start planning before June, before we completely all of this. The last 2 are safety and finance, so those goals typically are pretty easy to plug in. Safety we haven't had before.
Would it be possible, and tell me how much of a lift this is, but would it be possible to take a hybrid approach where I totally see the value of getting these presentations and having an opportunity to talk about it and discuss them, but for the purposes of an evaluation, could we get not a summarized version, but something on paper? We can go through it, like just to be able to make those assessment decisions, but then still have the ability over the next 5 meetings to have these types of discussions more broadly for each of the priorities.
Anything's possible.
Without you losing too much sleep working on something, putting something together. I don't know how much of a lift that is. That's the thing. Like if it's like an unreasonable amount of work, like obviously we'd have to weigh it.
Yeah, it depends on how much detail you want.
Yeah, last year you provided links to objective evidence, and so that's pretty significant.
That was a little bit more.
I think it might be best. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you.
It's okay. I was just saying last year I was able to keep up more throughout the year too. With there's a little bit better pattern to the year.
Yeah.
Where this year isn't, but that doesn't mean I can't. I can see what I can do.
I'm wondering if it might be best to stick with the calendar for board agendas for this school year, just because when these goals were set, we did have in mind at that time that the evaluation would be done in June. So if we do the evaluation too much sooner, as in like our next meeting, we've kind of moved the goalpost for Jason. So there's going to be things obviously that cannot be done, and that's totally fine. These are goals, and so sometimes things just can't happen that year. But I think it might be more fair for his evaluation for us to have that evaluation done at the regular time. And then if that's if we want to move that up going forward, do that for the next school year.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Can we do the 2021-22 planning of priorities in parallel with receiving the having the discussions on our 2020-2021 school year? Like, is there an issue with that, I guess?
I think it makes sense. We review it, see if this is an ongoing goal, see if there's any change.
Yeah.
Anything that should be revised, you know, given the change in the environment, or anticipated change in the environment. I think it would make sense. Good time to at least collect that feedback.
Yeah.
Right, because I think Jose's point originally was, this was a discussion that he and I had just a few weeks ago. We are already planning for next year now. So it would make sense that we'd start having some of those discussions now for next year's goals. Is that my understanding?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And if our ability to plan for next year isn't affected by us not done assessing and evaluating
For
this
this
year, then we can do it in parallel. I think that's fine.
Some of it might be,
Yeah.
like budget, we don't even
Yeah.
know yet, but, another one's gonna be what our test scores are like at the end of this year, but we know we're gonna be focused on reading and math, so.
Yeah.
And we know we're gonna be focused on social emotional learning next year because, we know that our community and kids have experienced trauma to some degree this year, so we know kind of those things, so I'm anticipating those to be goals again next year, to some degree.
Yeah. I'm good with that approach.
Any other thoughts? So it sounds like, it feels like we're gonna do one priority presentation, a meeting, and concurrently work on goals for next year, and then in May, when we're done, we'll not only evaluate, but be pretty much ready for a strong discussion on our priorities for the next school year. Okay,
That feels comfortable.
Yeah.
sounds good. Somebody write that down before we forget. Superintendent evaluation, do we want to
No,
discuss
we're
that?
still on so,
Okay,
the principals are ready
Oh,
to
yeah.
share priority ones.
Yeah.
so do the
We're still on
priority
track.
one.
Look at them, they are just ready to go.
They look so excited.
They've been begging me for a couple of board meetings now to be able to present, so. They said something to the effect of, does the board even know we exist anymore?
They were asked for.
No.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us. Here we are. We're ready to go.
Yeah, we had to cut this down. We were so eager. We were going to do a 2-hour presentation, but we just cut it down.
An hour and a half.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll first do introductions just to make sure you guys know who we are. I'm Ben Walsh. I'm the elementary principal.
Yeah, it's kind of nice that the little name tag is at the bottom of the screen when we talk, though, too. But I'm Jake Jorgensen. I'm the principal at the middle school.
But it doesn't say principal next to it.
Oh, that's true.
So we're going to be talking about the social emotional well-being of our students and staff and approaches that we have taken as a district, and then breaking up into different things that we've done at individual schools. So we're going to start with our district things that we have done jointly together. Sorry, there we go. Whoops, sorry. It's a little slow on my end. One of the big things that we started this year was initiating restorative practices, which is, you might have heard this buzzword. It's going around the state, the country, a different approach to how we
Problem
go
solve.
into situations. What's that? I'm sorry, Jake.
Problem solve when, you know, if issues come up at school between students or adults.
So we wanted to at least give you a quick overview of what restorative practices is, because this is going to be an initiative that we're going to be implementing over the next few years. This is our first year implementation. We're working with a consultant named Allie Hearn, who is a big guru when it comes to restorative practices. And so we want to at least give you an idea what restorative practices are. So I want to go ahead and play our video.
Our world is changing at a breathtaking pace. Social patterns that have long characterized human life are changing dramatically around the globe, diminishing social bonds within families, schools, workplaces, and communities. But humans are hardwired to connect. Just as we need food, shelter, and clothing, we also need strong and meaningful relationships to thrive. With all this in mind, what is restorative practices? Restorative practices is an emerging social science that studies how to strengthen relationships between individuals and within communities. When put into practice, the effects are profound. In schools, students experience greater safety and sense of belonging, resulting in improved behavior, less bullying, and less violence. In workplaces, leaders facilitate direct communication among staff and address conflict as it arises. The result is higher performance, greater accountability, and effective collaboration. In criminal justice, new options allow victims and offenders, friends and family, to repair the emotional harm caused by crime. Throughout our neighborhoods, restorative practices give regular people more voice in the issues that matter most. In a nutshell, restorative practices is the science of relationships and community. Your individual daily interactions have a big impact on the world around you, at your job, with young people, and throughout your community. How we relate matters. This video was brought to you by the International Institute for Restorative Practices. To learn more, attend our flagship event, Basic Restorative Practices. Our world is changing.
So that's just gives you a quick idea what restorative practices is. As you can see, it's going to apply both to students and staff. So this year is more of the introduction of restorative practices, learning about the theory behind it. And so really that's the key before you start implementing restorative practices within a school setting, is what is that theory behind it. And so we initially started off this journey with restorative practices with a core leadership team back at the end of summer, beginning of the school year. And that team was initially trained in restorative practices. And so we just recently introduced the entire theory of restorative practices with our entire staff at our February in-service. And so now we're going to take our next steps with training more staff and then implementing that practice behind it. And so we're still in the early stages of that, but we know it's essential that we at least create that framework for our staff so they're familiar with examples of restorative practices. One of those is a restorative circle. And so one thing that our building administrators have started this year, just to get the ball rolling so everyone's familiar with it, is whoops, I'm sorry. I skipped ahead to a slide. Bear with me, sorry. So why do schools want to implement restorative practices? Relationships, you heard in that video. Within ourselves and within our community. The social emotional learning competencies, which is essential to social emotional learning. As Jason mentioned, there's a lot of trauma that everyone has experienced over the last year. And so we need to be more informed of what individuals are walking in with on a daily basis. Equity. Improve culture and climate within the school setting with both students and staff. Create those spaces so everyone is feeling comfortable so they can come together and problem solve situations that may be encountered on a daily basis, both at school, home, community. And notice an alternative to traditional discipline. And that would be something that we're going to be slowly introducing our students to as we encounter those problem solving situations that students encounter that typically we've been tackling through a disciplinary process, but we might looking at a different approach to how we problem solve with students. So as I mentioned before, our first thing that we initiated this year was creating a restorative circle. And so our building administrators created a forum every Thursday called Millburn Strong. Strong stands for staff together, reaching out to nurture and grow. As you can see on the left-hand side is the purpose behind this, so that staff members can connect with each other, create an opportunity for dialogue, learn from each other, express and listen to perspectives, being heard, genuine interaction with others, open dialogue for staff interaction, and community building. So we always want to create options for our staff members. So we have a 7:30 session and a 3:30 session. We always start off with an intentional opening just to get the ball rolling, get their minds thinking. Then we pose a question. They think about it for a few moments, and then we pass the virtual talking stick. Right now, we're doing this all through Zoom. And so it's even new for Allie Hearn, who's experiencing the virtual aspect of things with restorative practices. And so she's been great with giving us some suggestions of how we can do this in a virtual setting. And everyone is just gets a chance to share and express their thoughts. And then we have a closing. So for example, one of the questions we might pose just recently this past week, the question that we posed was, what is something that you failed at first, but that failure pushed you to keep trying? So it's a somewhat deeper thought. But then also we have fun questions that we do on certain weeks, which is, if you can time travel, where would you go and what would you do? And sometimes it's fun to hear those stories and hear those experiences. And again, it depends on the purpose behind it. Some people just love to connect, especially those that are in a remote setting. So we're seeing some great success with Millburn Strong. So now we're going to break it down into the different schools and what we're doing with social emotional learning. So we're going to start with MES and what we're doing with staff members at the elementary. Ms. Gedville sends out a weekly survey just to get where everyone's at with things, how their week went, if they have any questions or concerns, if they would like an administrator to check in on them. And so we send that out on a weekly basis. We review it to see how people are doing. What we also included was a comment section. And so staff members that put a comment, we actually put it into a Sunday slice. So Ms. Gedville sends this out on Sundays, which when people put in comments, they often share fun stories that they experienced over the course of the school week with kids or projects that they're working with, or conversations they had with staff, or even with parents. A lot of funny moments, but also an opportunity for staff members to share even from questions, frustrations that others might have similar frustrations too. So kind of show they're not alone in these type of circumstances. We, as I mentioned, restorative circles is something that we're been introducing to our staff, just so they're familiar with what it is. We do this at our committee meetings. Grade level meetings are doing this on occasion as they start out their grade level meetings. And then we're doing this on a monthly basis at our staff meetings. Again, having that circle time of posing that question, having everyone have a chance to share and reflecting. So again, creating that framework with restorative practices. Within our schedule, I know that there's a lot of unique things that have happened this year, but one of the positives that have come from this year within our schedule is our lunches. So our entire staff actually has a common lunchtime. Typically, our lunches are pretty much set to you eat with your grade level teams, but with everybody within the building having the same lunchtime, they're able to connect with a bigger audience, a bigger set of their colleagues, ones they don't necessarily have a typical lunch with. We also have common team times now this year. So that's at the end of the day for any vertical articulation or even connecting across grade levels, where before, again, team time was always staggered throughout the day. So you only get the team with your particular team that you work with, but now it's common, at least this year anyway. Within our staff, our PBI's team knew that it was essential to connect with staff to make sure that we know that they're working hard. And so they've come up with some great ideas for our staff members. We've done trivia nights, which we did over winter break. We've had a mixed bag of goodies that we've passed out. Just recently, we did Orange You Glad It Is Trimester 3, which everything in the bag was orange. So we would deliver those to the homes of staff members. And also, actually, just right now, we're in the middle of Mustang Madness. It's March Madness. Typically, it's basketball. We're doing trivia. We just started this last Friday, where they're broken up into teams, and we do trivia, and we record scores. And the top 2 teams on the Friday after spring break, they're going to be competing for a lunch with their teams. So again, something that we're providing for our staff. Now for our students. Right away in our schedule, we wanted to make sure we expanded our social emotional time for our students. And so every day at the beginning of the day, not only is it homework time, but also a time for teachers to connect with their students in a many different variety of activities on how they do that. One example, here's an example of a first grade of how this first grade teacher connects with their students. They do a daily check-in to see how they're feeling. And then they take those survey results, and the teacher kind of sees where their class is at. Maybe they need to connect with a student if they are feeling sad. Maybe it's getting a group of kids together if they are feeling similar feelings. And so again, another opportunity to connect with kids on a daily basis. Second step is our social emotional curriculum that we utilize. We've utilized this for a number of years. And so one of the things that we recently did over the last couple of years is making sure everyone's on the same page with our units. And so we have a scope and sequence of our lessons. And so this is something that we do on a weekly basis with providing these lessons to our students. Here's an example of our unit on emotional management. And this is one that we're wrapping up this week. And you can see these are the lessons that each grade level is doing within this unit. And then next week, we move into our problem solving unit with social emotional learning. We've had a handful of spirit weeks, which are always fun with kids connecting, having a good time. We've done it in winter. We did it for winter, Valentine's Day, and just recently we did it for Read Across America Week. We can continue to do our PBIS program with our students with providing ACKs, which are short for acknowledgments, students that are following those expectations that we remind students every day, being respectful, responsible, and safe is our expectations we have. And so we've given out over 60,000 ACKs to students this year, and they use those in a variety of ways, either teacher stores, or we have raffles on a monthly basis for our students. And then Ms. Gedville and I deliver those either to the classrooms, or if they're remote, we deliver to their homes. One of the things that we started this year, just because we've typically done announcements over the PA system, we moved to virtual announcements on a daily basis. And I think this is one of those that's going to be in place for years to come. We've seen a lot of positive things that have come out of the daily announcements. I personally love it just because I love entertaining anyway, for those of you that know me. So I always have a good time with that. But we do a variety of different things with the announcements, not only just important messages, but we also teach things. We taught the entire school about the Electoral College during the morning announcements. We just recently finished up learning where the states are in our country using a fun song. And hopefully for those of you that have kids at the elementary, I sure hope they've sung that to you, because it gets in your head pretty good. And so we've done that this year, which is a great way for us to connect with the students, even though we're not there in front of them a lot of the time. And then one of the most popular things that we've done is Millburn News. This is something actually that Mr. Gore, our music teacher, brought to our attention, something that he was really passionate about. And so we record a Millburn News segment every week for the students. We do shout outs in there. We do a lot of fun activities. Kids enjoy it. They rely on it on a weekly basis. And so when this presentation is shared with you, I'm not going to play this right now. Feel free to listen to this video. It's a great time. Our staff members love it. They giggle a lot. Our kids giggle a lot with it too. So exciting. Again, one of those things that we're going to be probably continuing on even past the COVID related circumstances. So that's a little bit about the elementary and moving on to now middle school.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mr. Walshire. As we go through the slides for the middle school, you'll notice some similarities and differences between the two buildings, but we're going to talk a little bit about what's being done on the staff side of the social and emotional connections that we're implementing with our staff. The quarterly staff surveys that we've been doing. So this is a sample one where it's a check-in just to see how the staff is holding up during the isolation of COVID and some of the struggles with remote instruction and things like that. We also have our themed shirts for the school year, along with the Cougar Code that all of our teachers are, wearing on Wednesdays. It's nice and it brings some unity to the staff and some connection amongst all of them. You can see that the theme is Millburn Strong, which is the same theme as the other building. And then the Cougar Code is being positive, being kind, being safe, and working hard. You've heard about the restorative practices, restorative circles, and we're starting our meetings that way. Typical meeting would have a mindful moment of 90 seconds of like a relaxation or a breathing exercise or a disconnect from technology, just so that you're ready for the content of the meeting. And within those meetings, there's breakout questions where groups are put into small randomized groups, and there's adult sharing and connection on a pertinent question. And then we'll come back together as a group and we'll share out. Staff meetings are monthly on the first Wednesday of every month. And we also offer office hours with the principals, Mondays and Fridays. And that's an invitation to the staff, to all staff from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock. We also have connection time built into the schedule for our staff. So their plan time, their lunch time, and their team time are universal amongst the grade levels and the different disciplines, so that they can work professionally with one another during that time, or they can connect socially with each other during their lunchtime. The team times have typically, in a typical year, would be grade level focused team times, and they still are, but we're able to also incorporate department team times, which are cross grade levels, because it is a common time. And then back one more. Yep. And then on Wednesdays, we also started a lunch sign up and delivery. So we have a staff member that offered to collect through a Google form people's lunch orders, and then pick it up and bring it to them at school so that they can have a nice meal that day. Some PBIS supports, so treats. Everybody likes treats throughout the day. Not throughout the day, but periodically. And some people like treats throughout the day too. So we did a thankful treat bag around Thanksgiving, and those were delivered to home addresses. So staff members were working remotely during that time, and the thankful treat bags were driven to all of their homes. And then welcome back bags were on desks after winter break. Just, making sure that staff members, know that they're appreciated and valued at the school. And November, there was a social gathering where we were, using conversation and sharing and connection to just kind of build relationships. And of course, you have to include a Kahoot trivia game in that event too. And then for students, we are also running the check-ins. We've done 2 panorama quarterly check-ins. These are about 20 questions, and the results include information on the academic needs that students are experiencing, their engagement, and their student relationships. And then we've recently started a weekly check-in where we're encouraging kids to identify a trusted adult in their lives, and also just checking in just to see how they're feeling over the week, if they've been feeling pretty bad, or if they're feeling moderate, or if they're feeling terrific. And then we have some follow-up if they rate themselves in a low category. And then every day is a check-in built into first period. We call this the 10-minute morning connection. The purpose of this is just to prepare ourselves for learning and build up communication, find similarities within each other, and support each other. So an example in there is, a slide in there is, every week has a theme, a quote from somebody famous. It's usually like inspirational in some aspect, or encouraging. And on the right side there, just kind of gives an example of how that runs, where there's a 60-second time where they're just quiet and just, because sometimes you're just, in a hurry to get to your first period class, and you're scarfing down the last few bites of your cereal and things like that. And so if you can get into that meeting and have 60 seconds to just breathe and get comfortable and be ready for learning, that's good. And then the teacher poses a question to the students. And in this one, it looks like, who is a successful adult that you know, and what makes them successful? And the kids take turns kind of passing it from one to the other, where one person would share their answer to that question and then pass it to a classmate. And then that classmate would share their answer. And then if there's time, they'll talk a little bit more about that quote of the day, and then the academic period begins. Also, there's Friday theme days. So the kids obviously like those. On the left, you can see fun background day. So kids were putting monster pictures and cartoon characters and things like that. In the upper right was Wear Red Day. So kids were dressed in their red clothing. And then on the bottom one, this one kind of came up out of nowhere. This was like Kool-Aid Man Day or something. So kids had that as their background. And then we do some PBIS acknowledgements of students as well. So over on the left, there's some raffles that are advertised to the students. You can see that there's Amazon gift cards, Starbucks gift cards, candy, and a new one that we're trying is breakfast pizza from Antioch Pizza. So that's kind of nice. Students use their ACKs that they earn throughout the day or throughout the week. They use those and they submit them into a raffle. And then those items get delivered to their houses. We also recognize Students of the Month. This follows our Cougar Code, the different categories of being positive, kind, safe, and working hard. Student picture slideshows are shared with all the students, and parents are notified via email to kind of keep it secret from their student, but send us a picture to use in the slideshow. And then those slideshows get shared on Fridays with the students in the classes. The staff is taking time to deliver that cup of goodies and that certificate to the doorstep of all the students that are being recognized each month. And we have gift certificates for Antioch Pizza in there. They've been supporting us for years. They've been supporting us, which is great. So, giving us certificates for free pizzas, and that's what that looks like. So Wednesday morning welcomes. Back before COVID, we would have a very elaborate Wednesday morning welcome for students, and the staff would be outside to greet them. And we haven't been quite able to do that. So, but we are able to still welcome students with music. So we recently started having music outdoors as the kids are getting dropped off of the bus and dropped off by parents and on their way into the building. And then inside the building, there's music playing as well. Service projects, the middle school has endeavored one service project this year where it was recognizing Martin Luther King's Jr.'s service to others. That's the day of service in January, where students and staff work together to make thank you videos for frontline workers, letters to veterans, chores around the house, and letters to the elderly. And the staff is planning another event on March 18th. During the afternoon, where the students are going to sign up, if they choose to sign up in the afternoon, to do service projects where they would be making birdhouses, kindness rocks, blankets, and homeless boxes of necessities for people that are homeless. And last, extracurricular activities. The middle school has had a Scholastic Bowl season remotely. We had golf in this fall and cross country in the fall, and we just started up volleyball in the last couple of weeks. We've also had the yearbook club, student council, NJHS, newspaper, and then we had our fine arts that are still meeting. So band lessons are still taking place, and choir is still in place and meeting and performing and learning. I think that closes us out.
Any questions about any of our activities or things we put in place this year?
No, I just wanted to say thank you. This is an excellent presentation, and there's a lot of great things happening for the kids and the staff. It's really great to see.
Thanks.
I would second that.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Jorgensen and Mr. Walshar. That was excellent presentation on a lot of stuff we had no idea was going on in the schools. Looks like you guys are doing a great job.
Yeah, it looks like you've more than just adjusted, so thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I have a couple questions. In regards to, sorry, I'm taking notes in multiple places.
Okay.
Give me one sec. Yeah, so in regards to monitoring the social and emotional health of the students and staff, so I saw, you know, where there's like surveys being done on a regular basis for the staff. How are we tracking that on the students? And can we tell how it's changed, or if there's been some change to a baseline social and emotional status throughout the year?
Jake, does,
Sorry, go ahead, Jason.
oh, good question. Go ahead, Ben.
Well, I was just gonna say that I was just thinking the same thing, that we didn't necessarily collect a baseline. I know that in years past, we've done a school climate survey with students to see where they're at with those things, but we typically have always done that towards the end of the year. But this year we did not even think about that, creating that baseline. I think we were just somewhat eager to kind of make sure that we're supporting them and coming up with those activities, to make sure that we can hear from them, respond to them if needed. But it's at least something to consider as we move forward. Like, let's monitor that growth. How do we know this is working with the things we have in place?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, certainly it'd be a very different survey design. It'd have to be really repetitive questions that you could then establish in that baseline, and I mean, that's tough. That's definitely something that would be requiring forethought. And
Jake, does the panorama, how long have you done that?
So we started it in the beginning of the year. We've done it twice. So so there would be a baseline for that. I think that the next round that we do that during the third quarter here would probably give us some results that you could compare based on the first one that was done in the fall, because they are those kind of repetitive questions that are the same. So it would give you some little bits of movement one way or the other on how kids are rating that. One of the difficulties is like timing of that survey on when it's completed. So the last time we did it was, I think, right during that in between Thanksgiving and winter break time. So it was kind of became disjointed a little bit for the middle school kids with their time in class. So the results were a little bit less reliable, I think.
Yeah, I think it's something worth doing. Just I don't know very much about restorative practices, like outside. This is the first time I hear this term, so it would just be good to understand, is it working, right? I'm assuming that we made an investment into this practice, into this initiative, so why not track it and see how it's going?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I know that one of those things that Allie Hearn has even told us about is how do we progress monitor that? Many schools have done, monitoring it by referral data. Students that are getting referred, or is that one way? We haven't necessarily defined that yet, if that's going to be truly our monitoring tool. But that's definitely something that has been discussed with our restorative practice leadership team as we start getting to that full implementation once the staff is trained in that.
Great, thank you.
Good question.
Thank you, gentlemen. We look forward to the next presentation next time.
You're gonna have to top that.
Shouldn't be a problem, right? Just come up with some fireworks and some music, and we'll be all set. All right. Thank you again. Let's start discussing our superintendent evaluation.
I believe everyone has access to the form. Did I send that out yet or not?
Yeah.
I'll pull it up on the screen Basically, just wanted to let everybody know that it's there and to look at it, and as we present, maybe be thinking through some of these items over the next couple of weeks, and maybe even as I put things into, where did I put that?
How's this gonna work? Everyone's just gonna vote individually and then we're gonna find the average and that's gonna be the score?
Basically.
Yeah, so the way that it worked last year was the first time using it as a Google form. And the great thing about it is that everyone filled it out in advance, and then we were able to just kind of look and see where we fell. And it was a great way to focus the conversation if there were things that, you know, we were split down the middle, or we had a lot of people feeling one way and not many people feeling another way. It was a good opportunity to discuss and see if we were interpreting it correctly, if there was something maybe we missed. It just really helps open up the conversation. And then we kind of take what the majority answer is for each item. And then Brendan will meet with Dr. Lind and go over everything where it is. But it's kind of a great way to collect the answers and also easily kind of discuss and figure out what we need to look at closer.
Yeah, Denise, it was very helpful for us to do that first and then meet as a group and talk about it, because I think it then allowed everyone to have some understanding of everyone's thoughts on the scale. You know, how you interpret a scale when providing the responses and the assessments. So, and it was good because after discussion, some people moved some ways or others. So yeah, that was very helpful the way we did it last year.
So personally, I feel like there's some of these questions as I was reading through them that I don't know that I feel comfortable answering myself, just because I don't have the context of a full year's worth of, I can't rate you outside of being a parent, right? But, so I almost feel like, and tell me if this is allowed, I would rather not answer some of the questions, just defer to those who have been part of this group for the entire year, and then answer the ones that I am comfortable doing.
Yeah, and that's why I was saying it was helpful for the group to discuss this, because, you know, the first time through, I hadn't gone through and didn't have concrete examples of you know, how things have been done. So.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, will that skew the averages on the responses? If there is a no response, it will count towards the average, correct?
Correct.
Well, but it'll show up that who's participated in the survey, so we'll be able to see, because I have everybody putting their email addresses in, we can see everybody's individual response, which I think is helpful too, because sometimes if you'd completed the form kind of anonymously, you might forget what you responded as and then say, well, that's not really what I was thinking. So it shouldn't be a problem, because it's also going to be presented to Jason from what we all decide. Does that make sense? So it doesn't matter if somebody skips it and says, you know, I'm not really sure, I don't know how to answer that. And then when we meet and discuss, maybe they have an opinion strongly one way or another, or they don't. We just go with what the majority of the group says.
Okay.
And part of the point is not necessarily, so we don't take the score and say that's your score. This is to build the discussion going, to make sure we understand it, because we work pretty closely with Dr. Lin and we all like him, but we need some objective thoughts on how he's doing, how he's meeting. You know, one of our primary goals as board is to interpret the input from the community and set up the goals for the school, and then Dr. Lin kind of is our agent who achieves those goals. So he's going to come back and say, these are the goals you set up last year. This is what I did to get to them, and then we rate that and talk about that, and hopefully objectively come back and say, all right, we think you did a good job, but you need to work on this area, or I think we could have done better, or you really knocked that one out of the park, or whatever. It's important that we keep this professional relationship with him so that as the years go on, he just doesn't come, well, that was the last board superintendent and we need our own guy in here. We want him to continue being a quality leader of the district for as long as it works for both parties. And this is just kind of making sure it's working for both parties and that we're all in the same, working towards the same goal.
Do we get any type of year-end feedback from the community on these types of questions? Like, I'm not saying that we should do this, but just like,
You know,
doing this survey and sending it out.
So up until last year, there really was no good way of doing that, you know. But we've got the crowdsourcing tool, which has really helped. In fact, I was thinking too that at least for 2022 goals, if we could do like an initial review of here's what we're considering for next year. Is there anything that you think is out of alignment? I mean, we don't want people to go too far, right?
Yeah.
Because we've got access to the source to understand what has been done and that, but I do think it's a good idea and it's smart at least to know that we're going in the right direction. I like your idea too. But now we're very fortunate to have that tool, which we didn't have until this last year.
No,
It's good timing.
that's a great suggestion. I mean, last year was the first time we tried going through with the Google form to really rate how we're achieving these goals. So, yeah, it's a good step forward, a good move forward.
Yeah, something worth considering for the next year.
Yeah. I mean, even, and yeah, we pay a lot of money for that survey tool, so as often as we get to use it, so without overuse, I think it's a good idea. So that could be something we could think about. One of our jobs as the board, elected officials, is to evaluate Dr. Lynn, but also we've got to spend a lot of time making sure that we're listening to the community and responding to their needs and desires. So it's a good idea to get their input.
Yes, and we used the thought exchange this year. Well, not only when we were helping develop the strategic plan, but that was one of the ways. So we used the thought exchange this year when setting the district goals, was reaching out to the community through the thought exchange to see what was important. So that was very helpful.
Any other thoughts and questions on this? Suggestions for improvements?
All of you have access to the goals. They're in the folder. So if you just, in your drive, if you type in Millburn District 24 or district goals or something, it should pop up. And I'm linking each of the presentations to that, so you can have something to go back and reference. And I'll also link anything else that I have that's specific to the questions, like maybe the extracurricular activities I can link right here on what we're doing. I'll keep trying to add to this. I know last year, that's what I did, is I linked every bullet to a different sheet.
Yeah.
This year took a little different approach with the presentation, because I think it was important information to share too, but we can do a little bit of both.
So our goal is to have these completed post the 5 presentations and then review them afterward? Okay. And can you do a piecemeal? And could I just do one part of it? Well, this is fresh in my mind, this presentation.
It should.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, it should stay there until you submit or even if you close out, right?
When you,
For the doc.
so it depends on how we set it up. We can set it up that way, but so you can go through and submit, and then we can set it up so you get a link to go back to, but you can't lose that link. Right, so you can go through the whole thing, hit submit, and then use that link to go back to your actual entries and make edits.
Okay, got it.
So you
Yeah.
can skip all the stuff you don't know, go all the way to the end, hit submit, there'll be a link, save that link,
And I could go
and
back,
then go back and
adjust it.
finish
Okay.
it. Yep.
Yeah, I can send out the link as kind of like a take the quiz sort of thing. And I just updated it so that it says that you can edit your response after you submit it. So then you'd be able to go back in and add responses as the presentations come in.
Just make sure when the first time you hit that submit, there'll be a little link, and that's individual for you. And there's no other place to get it.
You may not gain access right away.
All right, anything else on superintendent evaluation?
That was it.
Good. Let's move on to board agreements.
Get back to the agenda here.
So I wasn't clear, is this the board agreement that we had in place that we're looking to gain alignment on for the next year? Or have there been adjustments made to it and we're gonna discuss those?
We discussed these last year and agreed on them, and so we'll discuss them again. We didn't make many changes.
These are actually, the last time we approved when they were created was in 2018, and we had planned on seeing if there were any adjustments that needed to be made to those agreements last year, but with everything with COVID, we just pushed it off. So I think we did a very good job. I think, if I remember correctly, I think Jim actually played a big part in putting this together. And I think we covered a lot of stuff. I don't really see that there's anything that needs to be changed, but I think it's probably a good idea just to be in the habit of reviewing and seeing if things need to be changed periodically.
So if you haven't read through them, take the opportunity in the next couple of weeks, and if you have any questions or suggestions for improvements or whatever, just bring them up, and we can approve these.
So there's actually one that I read weird to me under the ethics section, number 5, the board email. It doesn't read very transparent to me. I understand what the goal of it is, right? It's basically responsible communication. But it just seems like stay away from email because there's Freedom of Information Act implications to it. And I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to be a little bit more clear that we want the board to practice responsible communication via email in alignment with Freedom of Information Act, ...
I think when we wrote this, we were just wanting to make sure nobody hit reply all and violated the Open Meetings Act.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. But certainly if you have suggestions to clarify the language, please feel free to put those in there.
Yeah, I'll do that. I see those little colors popping up. That's people making changes, I assume, or
I was just looking through.
putting comments in.
If you highlight it, you can put a comment in on the side if you like.
Got it. Okay, I'll do that.
You'll see like a blue plus on the right side.
I'm very Google Docs illiterate.
I should, or they say add comment.
Okay.
That we done. And these are for us, so make sure, whatever suggestions you have, you let them out so that, you feel comfortable.
Sure.
And we can approve these whenever we're ready to. If you guys want to put them off till April, or if we want to look at them and approve them in March, it's up to you. I think we'll put them on the next agenda, but if you don't want to, if we're not ready to approve them, we don't have to do that next time.
Okay.
All right. IAR assessments.
Okay, I just want to share with the board where I stand on state assessments in general, and then share passionately where I stand this particular year on state assessments. And you can disagree with me, and I'd love feedback on that, but just to be aware of where I'm coming from. I think my belief overall is that the state assessments in general are terrible and serve very little purpose, some positive purpose, very little purpose, but not compared to the great cost that the district has and what the children bear and teachers bear on administering these tests. So there's not a good return on investment is what I'm trying to say in a good year. In a good year, we're talking about 6 to 9, depending on the grade level, days of interruption, because there's 6 to 9 state assessments that we're required to give, depending on which grade they're at. And these tests can take from a minimum of 1 hour to administer by the time you give the instructions and the kids are into it, and then you wrap it up, to 2 hours, or pretty close to 2 hours. So it's a significant amount of time, and we're talking about third graders and a lot of stress taking these tests. So I'm not a big fan of the state assessment, just want to say that right there. I think if you could do it in a couple of, if they could accomplish their purpose in a couple of days and a couple of short tests, I'd be all for it. But doing this big, elaborate assessment that's high stakes and very stressful for children and miserable for everybody and expensive, I just don't see it. So I'll say that. I think in a year like this, when you are talking about 9 days of interruption, when we only have 4 hours a day with the kids in school, when we can only administer it to the kids in school, so you're going to get no valuable data out of this because it's garbage. The test window goes from March 15th, and now they're talking about putting the test window to next fall, that whole stretch. So there will be no valuable information given that we'll get out of this. And we'll have to administer this and try to figure out how to do it, present it to the kids. I think it's totally educational malpractice, in my opinion. And I feel firmly, very strongly about this. And it's ridiculous, but we have to do it. We were told by the state superintendent in no uncertain terms that she said, I will look very unkindly, and I would not appreciate if school districts decide to opt out of this completely. We can't afford to lose federal funding, which is what I believe this is tied to. which would cost us $500,000, so we have to do it. Given that fact, that we have to do it, given that I think it's educational malpractice and I want to get the board's feedback, I will do as little as possible if they give us any flexibility in not doing it much, just to check the box and offer it to our kids. So my plan is to administer this assessment with as little disruption as possible, not worry about makeups. So typically we make sure we have to meet a 95% threshold. We have to have 95% of our kids participate in the test and take the test and go through the whole thing, which means if a student is absent for a week, then we have to pull them out of class that next week and have them make it up, which is also a tragedy. Makes no sense, but that's what we do to get it done. This year I would say we're just not going to make it up. If the student's not there, they're not there. We're not going to make the kids who are doing remote learning try to come in and do it. If kids don't feel comfortable coming into school in the first place, why would we make them come into school to administer this test that's virtually worthless? We may offer it to them if they wanted to come in and do it. If their parents said, hey, I really want to see where my child's at on this assessment, great. We're not going to turn them away, but I'm not going to go out of my way to do this. And I'd like to do it probably the last week of school. I'm anticipating that we're going to get a little bit of flexibility with, I already said that the window looks like they're going to open up the window at least through the middle of June, probably to the end of June, if not into next fall, for some school districts. So if we did it that last week of school, which I'd rather trade academic days in April versus academic days at the end of June, as far as instruction and learning, we could do that. We could still make it fun for the kids that last week. Maybe they do a test a day the last 5 days. I'm hearing that they might shrink down the number of tests that they're going to require this year too. I'm hoping. So if that happens, and if we can do it during that last week, we'll do 1 test a day with the kids. Whoever shows up that day, take the test, and then do other fun activities after that. That's my soapbox idea. Does anybody have any thoughts or comments on that, or disagree?
I do, Jason. Is there any, I'll call it funding. Is there any funding that's based on the results of the testing? So if the testing turns out really well or turns out very poorly, does that affect any funding that you would know of?
No.
Okay, so it's really is a waste of time on a couple different levels.
You know, I have a question. Jason, you said typically we need to have 95% participation. Where does that requirement come from? And what is the result if we don't have 95% participation?
If we don't have 95% participation, we get graded down on our school report card.
Okay, graded down on school report card means great schools, scores go down?
Something like that.
So great schools,
not great schools is its own website.
It's different, a different governing body. They don't refer to the school report card at all.
Not even a public body.
Yeah, this is the one.
Yeah, I understand it's not a public body, but what sources do they use, right? That's my question. Would they use that as a source?
Yes.
Because if they use that as a source, that lowers the grade school score. That grade school score is often tied to Realtor.com and other real estate agencies. Could impact the assessed value of people, people's homes, not assessed value in a taxing term, but the
market value.
Yeah, the perception of the value and the perception of the performance of the schools. So to me, that's a big concern. The other thing is, I wonder if parents, when talking to others in different surrounding districts or farther away, will they have these discussions and saying, my child did this well on it, how'd your child do? And then if there are no consistent scores across the board, You know, I think this is, I hear what you're saying. I think that there are other potential impacts, and maybe impacts, you know, within the community, and how they would perceive this decision.
Right.
You know,
That's
so
why I
for
wanted
me,
to-
that's a concern. One, how is the school district going to be perceived? And then what are the results of that perception? And two, what will the parents think? How will they react? Will they think that they're getting less out of the school because their child now isn't being assessed on this?
That the district isn't prioritizing.
Yeah. That because it may be perceived by people not as close to the process as you and taxpayers that, look, I'm sending my kids to school. I want to be able to measure them.
Right.
How they're performing against everyone else. To me, that's a very real concern. Very real concern. Now,
Well,
has the state taken into consideration these things, other than the window, extending that window of time for testing? Have they said that, you know, maybe they will change up the test, make the questions fewer, revise at all? Have they decided that?
Yeah, they've talked about, they haven't decided anything yet, and the window starts on March 15th.
Okay, good.
So, no, but they have talked about shortening the test. I don't know what that means, if it means fewer questions,
Yeah.
probably not. Probably means out of the 3 math tests, they'll take 2 or something.
Okay. And then one other concern I have too is, will people, whether it be governing bodies, whether it be parents, will they use this as a measure of the impact of COVID and being out of school on student performance?
Not if I can help it, but they might. And that would be a
I just
tragedy.
think, you know, if we look at it holistically, I think that there's a really big picture here.
Right. So on that, which is what's concerning me, which is why I think it's educational malpractice, to your points. Because if what you're saying is true, and I believe that you're right, that's a tragedy, because what people don't know what they're comparing between schools, because other schools are not gonna, Millburn might come out looking great on this. We don't know. Or not. But what we're comparing to, and the school districts we compare around, are not in as good a shape as we are.
Yeah.
So there's that, but there's, the other thing is that we have data internally to measure, and we will be using MAP scores to measure growth from fall to spring.
Yeah.
So we have consistent data that's actually gonna be somewhat accurate, that we will use to say, and we can put that out to our public to say, this is what our kids did. We already have the IRLA, the independent reading level assessment at the elementary grades, that we know our students are growing from fall to spring, and more kids are moving up. Maybe not than last year, but they're still moving up and growing. So that's what I think we're gonna really have to communicate that, to your point.
I would ask, is your position, especially related to this year, or is that your ongoing position? Is that something you have embraced in years past and you will embrace in future years? Or is it, given our current circumstances, this is a real concern for you?
It's a real concern this year. It's always a concern for me. I don't like it, but I do it because of what you're talking about, because we're getting compared, and we do very well.
Yeah.
And we prepare for it. We put our all into it because we're required to do it. I don't like it, because I think it's not fair to kids. It's great for adults. It's great for information. It's terrible for kids. But in this particular year, you get less valuable information from an adult. I can't even look at these scores because they're going to be garbage as far as what we would typically use them for. And you're still putting the stress on kids. I think that's what I'm going toward, is educational malpractice. But you raise good points.
I would think this is definitely something you want to put out on Thought Exchange, because me personally, at least the position I'm in right now, thinking of you know, all these considerations I brought forward, I would say that we go forward with the test.
Oh, we're gonna do it, we're gonna do whatever we have to do. We'll do them, I'm just saying, how much effort do you want me to put into them?
So I have my own separate comment, but actually just jumping on what we were just talking about. I think getting feedback from the community makes sense, but not having Jason to walk through everything that you just walked through, I don't think people are gonna have the true context of it, right? I mean, I guess you could write, kind of a semi-dissertation on why the benefits and the cons against it, but I mean, people just saying like, oh, should we do standardized testing to align to state requirements? I'd probably say no. If you bring up the arguments you made, I'd probably say yes. But how do you communicate that in a thought exchange? I think that's challenging.
Yeah, well, I think you try.
Yeah.
I think you try bullet point, otherwise it could just read on forever.
Yeah.
But maybe a pros and cons.
Yeah, so that's actually, it gets me to the question that I had, Jason. Can you give me the state superintendent's perspective, or why it is that the state believes this is a valid and valuable thing to do right now? Like, I've heard your perspective, and I think it's completely fair, but what's the other side of it?
It's compliance. So this is all tied to federal funding. So all of our Title I funding, all of our federal funding comes from the federal government to the state government and then gets disseminated to the schools.
Based on these tests?
Based on these, not based on the results of the test, based on administering the tests.
So it doesn't matter what the tests show.
It doesn't matter what the tests show in most cases. Now, if you're really terrible, then there's certain helps that can be put into place if you score in a certain bracket. The state will provide more funding. It's not much, perhaps. But what it's tied to is that the federal law called, it used to be No Child Left Behind, now it's called, it's escaping me. Whatever the last accountability model was from the federal government said, okay, this is our accountability model in every state. In order to get federal funding, you have to meet the criteria. This assessment meets the criteria of that federal model. Now, I personally believe that there's other assessments that might meet the criteria without taking all this time, but that's not for me to decide. That's, the state said this is what our assessment is, and you have to have a reporting, certain requirements for reporting and grading and all of it. It's a big process. So it's compliance from the feds. So the state applied for a flat-out waiver. The fed said no. We're not going to waive it for all the states. And this isn't just Illinois. This is across the country.
Yeah.
There's a couple articles last week in the Newsweek and someplace else on this topic. And so state superintendents are trying to support their local superintendents who are saying this is ridiculous. But then the federal government's saying, no, we're not going to waive it. So the state has to say, okay, now we have to administer the test. Here's what we can do. We can maybe take some of the requirements away and still meet the demands of the feds.
Got it.
So that's where we're at. So whatever she thinks personally, I don't know, but she has to say, the party line is, her role is to say, I have to get this money. In order to get this money, we have to meet these requirements.
So,
Completely valid.
without
That's
kind of,
valid, right?
what's the federal position on why these tests are valid right now?
We don't know because the waiver was administered one day before the new Secretary of Education was installed. So the new Secretary of Education was installed last Wednesday?
I don't know who that is. I knew it was Betsy DeVos until the
Yeah,
20th.
it's not her.
Yeah.
So whoever the new person is, I'm not sure.
First one who was a teacher.
Yeah.
And a principal. So our real question is not, will we do it? The real question is how much effort will we put into disrupting our school day to make sure that we get as many students in there as possible and taking it seriously? Or do we want to do it the last week, which might actually be a bonus because, hey, I got to come in and take a test for an hour and then we're going to play ball or something like that. And who knows, that might improve.
It might be one way to keep the kids engaged.
It'll keep them engaged and on it.
Right.
So,
We don't know.
Yeah, I would just say, I think this is one you have to try very, well, I would say the best course is to tread very lightly. Because if we say we're not going to put effort into this, or much scrutiny on, you know, preparation here, and the kids do poorly, which is anticipated because of, you know, certain conditions we're under.
I'm not expecting great things.
Right, but I'm saying there's a danger there, right?
Right.
But I think, you know, and then if you do what you've done in the past for preparation, and the students don't do as well as they have done in the past, which I think is to be expected, but comparatively do well to those surrounding districts, it doesn't look like there was a lack of effort.
What are the surrounding districts thinking?
I don't know. Well, we've had many conversations about it. I'm definitely.
Have they all gone your same way? Have they all been in agreement with what you're saying?
Some.
Some.
Oh, philosophically or like?
Philosophically.
Yeah, how they're
That's what I'm,
executing,
yeah.
Philosophically, the wealthier school districts in the southern part of our county lean more toward what I think. I don't know if that's just because of me tracking with them in general. They don't put as much stock into the state. I don't know why that might be. I think most of the school districts in this area hate it, but they're gonna comply. There's some not quite as passionate as I am, or at least not, they wouldn't share it like I did at a board meeting, passionate. They'll go along and comply and do the best they can, but they're not gonna do. I mean,
Even some of them don't even have nearly the same percentage of students attending in person that we do.
Yeah,
Well,
and
yeah,
that's what I was
I've
gonna
only
say.
got 50% of my kids attending in person,
I mean, this
or
has
with
been,
us 70%, you know, it's not gonna be reflective of the entire
Yeah.
population.
I just think this has been a year of extraordinary efforts and I'd say accomplishments. Again, when we talked about the number of days, or percentage of days anticipated in-person attendance, you know, just my perspective is this is an opportunity to shine. And I don't know how much effort in preparation translates into actual results. That's something where I would, you know, I would have to rely on your experience if you've had varying years of effort or extenuating circumstances that didn't allow for, you know, the priority to be put on it. I would always, and it's just my position is that I would have a real hard time not conducting as close to normal as you can given the current circumstances.
I know you mentioned it already, Jason, but how many hours do we need to commit to this testing?
for the kids.
Yes.
Is it 9 hours
9 hours.
in the testing environment?
So that'd be
For a
spread
third
out over
grade.
3 days, 3 or 4 days.
Yeah. Well, it's two. There's 5 tests, and they range from 90 minutes. No.
Yeah, the
70 minutes.
ELA is 90 minutes and the math is 60.
Isn't it 75?
75 only for third grade ELA.
Oh. So there's 3 math at 60, but then you add 15 minutes for the script ahead of time,
Yeah.
and then your wrap up and shut down is 15 minutes at the end, so there's another 30 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I put that in the board minutes.
So that's why it would be over the course of a week, over the 5.
Yeah, yeah.
The last
You
week
could
of
do-
school, let's say.
Depends on if you do 1 a day or 2 a day. You don't want to do Mondays, generally don't want to do Fridays, so we try to test on Tuesday through Thursday.
Yeah.
And I agree. I mean, that's very, very difficult when you've got 4-hour sessions and say we're gonna take an hour for the testing or.
Yeah, we'd only really have time for 1 a day for most of the days, so you could do 3 of them 1 week and 2 the next. It's disruptive.
So the last week of school, what you're potentially proposing, I remember when I was in school 30 years ago, what it was, like the last week of school was kind of garbage week, you just played games and did stuff. Is that still what people do in school?
Yeah, I would, yeah.
Yeah, well, just in terms of wrap up week.
Wrap up week,
Clean
yes.
lockers. And
So,
clean the halls.
I'd say there's less academic strain in the last week than typical weeks as far as learning goes. That's why I was kind of saying, if I'm looking at it from a learner's perspective, I want the kids to learn as much as possible this year. We haven't been in school that much. So learning days in April, I would say, are much more productive than that last week for kids.
And here's a question, if it were to be done, or at least some large portion of it to be done in the last week, how much does that impact the teachers as they're trying to close out for the year? I mean, is that I would assume that be a more impactful time as they're trying to close out the year, the grades, and
It might make it easier for them.
it might.
I
Okay,
haven't talked to
so then
enough of
that's
them yet,
that's
but
potential benefit too.
it might be a benefit to them because they won't need supplies for that. They won't need plans, all,
Okay.
typical. So they're winding down. All they need is the kids need their computers, scratch paper.
Okay.
It simplifies.
And again,
a
it may
little.
help retain some focus during that last week.
It might.
I really
I
like-
don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
I like the last week idea. Kids have learned more, so they've had that extra month
Yeah.
of learning. They'll be focused only on one thing and get that done, and then get a kind of reward and cleaning up and finishing up all missing work and all that stuff that you normally get in the last week.
Well, one of the reasons I was asking or making that statement about it being a wrap up is, do we see any type of drop off in attendance in the last week of school generally?
Definitely the last 2 days.
Because that would affect, I mean, if we're trying to stay within
Yeah.
that 95% kind of compliance, right, if that's one of our priorities, then that could be a challenge.
Of course, I was thinking this might get more kids to come if there's a reason. I have no
Yeah,
idea.
sure. Yeah.
Really, I don't. Because I was thinking about that, and then I was thinking, well, maybe more kids will.
And as
You
more
said it's
people
important.
get vaccinated, we might get more kids opting for in-person learning
Mhm.
later in the year too.
Yeah, there's also more kids that wanna go to Disney World.
But we're ending so the last day of school this year is Friday before Memorial Weekend. So I think that's gonna help. Because
With
usually
attendance.
people don't start vacations in May.
Yeah.
Usually it's when we have like a Monday or Tuesday. If we go over the weekend and we have to come back on Monday and Tuesday, our attendance is way down.
Yeah.
That's what I've seen.
And we may wanna end like Thursday.
The testing, yeah.
Probably a good idea.
I don't know. I have one here there. It's 'cause I was looking for the talking points that I'd already made. As Jose was talking about sending something out to the parents on talking points, and I've already written them down to share with our state superintendent. Here's my concerns. We don't know about the potential modifications yet. There's my concerns.
You said the only way of administering this test is in person.
Yeah, they won't let you do it online.
So for the 30%, I think we're at 30% of students who are not in
Correct.
person right now.
So 70% would take the test. We would offer it. Because if a parent, I don't know, was saying, if a parent wanted to see the scores or wanted to see,
Okay.
compare, they could. I would never deny them.
Right.
And that's just gonna add extra days too, because we don't have the whole 70% in on the same day, do we? I know in middle school, they got 6 and 7th. And then
No, we'll have them all in. Yeah. That's why I don't understand how Antioch can even do it, because they see their kids 2 days every other week, or 2 days. Is it 2 days a week? They would see their kids.
Tough.
It would, I mean, they'd be testing for months.
Is Lakeville doing that same kind of thing
Lakeville's
where
doing the
it's
same thing. So it's
Monday and Tuesday and then no, all remote on Wednesday and then Thursday and Friday it's a different group of kids, I think?
one of the schools only has the kids in 2 days a week for 2 hours. It's, they won't even have time to do that. That's all they would do that day. And they only have like 50% of their kids. I think Lakeville only has, I don't know, I'm confused. Woodland only has 50% of the kids coming back. So yeah, Sean, we'll rock the scores and that. Look like superstars. I think they're gonna throw them out anyway.
Well, we'll still be in the books.
No, I appreciate the thought, because I didn't think about great schools and that aspect of it.
Miguel Cardona is the new Secretary of Education.
Okay.
Came out of Connecticut.
So Jason, do you have what you need from the board? And then we talked a lot, but I'm not sure if we answered the question that I think you brought.
I will keep the board, we don't have to answer this tonight, so I will keep the board informed, but hopefully we'll have more information by the March meeting. We were planning on starting the assessments the first week back after spring break, and we're not gonna do that yet, because the suggestion from other people who are more in the know with the state is to wait as long as possible to see what the adjustments are gonna be, because we don't know yet, so. We're already planning to push them back. Typically, we emphasize in our district the math test, because the math tests count for teacher evaluations and principal evaluations. So that growth from fall to spring, we want to push that back as long as possible to get as much of as many learning days as we can between those 2 dates. So typically we push math back into middle May, but we might move that up a week and then have the IR after that. And then all the kids have to do in May is test.
Back-to-back tests.
That'll make them excited.
Well, they already do back-to-back tests. I mean, by the time they get to that last math test in May, especially the 7th and 8th graders, they're done. I mean, they're test burnout. It's a lot.
Right. I'm sure we'll discuss this more in future meetings. Future agenda items, has anybody thought of anything you want to put on there yet?
Just to make sure that the next priorities come up.
Say that again, please.
Priority 2.
Yeah, making sure that the next priorities 2, 3, 4, and 5 get added to the future agendas.
Will do, thank you. Superintendent's report.
Summer school we talked about a little bit. I will be volunteering at the vaccination pod again at Round Lake on Friday. So they've asked school districts to provide administrators to help them volunteer, and I'm happy to do that so we can get more shots in arms. Currently we have 42% of our staff members who have gotten their second shot already, so that's great news. And an additional 100 have gotten their first shot. So that's great. And we have about 200 and some staff, but out of the people that answered, that's about 90%. So that's wonderful, wonderful news, and very happy about that. Couldn't be more pleased. And that's about what we talked about in December, is planning to have everybody vaccinated by the end of spring break, like immunized by the end of spring break. So we're pretty close to that target, which is impressed. I actually thought we'd be a couple weeks sooner, but that's the plan.
Part of that was the availability of vaccine now.
That kind of
Because we did have, there were a few days that the site wasn't able to operate because they had no vaccine.
Well, we had plans for 5 days a week.
Yeah.
I signed up for a lot more days volunteering, and thankfully they got canceled, but.
So there's no shortage anymore, or are we experiencing?
No, they're short, they're still short. They have enough to finish the second shot now for the educational staff, only at the Round Lake and Stevenson pod. So the county is pushing all of their Moderna to those 2 pods first, and then any leftover they have for the Lake County fairgrounds.
Okay.
So there's no shortage as far as that group, it's just a matter of when you get it. So it might take you a couple extra days here and there. But they're pretty much set. And now with the increase, the production's picking up again, so I'm looking forward to the public getting more access, because there's a lot of people in that high-risk category, lots. But it was really, the last time I went, it was really nice to see. They opened it up because all the teachers were done and they had extra doses. So they opened it up to the LVAC system, anybody in the county. This one lady drove from Carpentersville to get it that night. Her daughter called up and said, hey, there's an opening around Blake, we're going now. This 85-year-old teacher. It's really cool. She was happy. Got to get out of the house for the first time. I mean, she's got the doctor's appointments, that's it.
Yep, that was my parents.
Yeah.
They now have both shots, 85 years old.
So there's that, summer school, and this is Elizabeth Keefe's last board meeting. So congratulations, Elizabeth. She's gonna be retiring on March 19th officially.
Wow.
That's when her days run out for this year, and so she'll be done.
Congratulations. It's outstanding.
Enjoy that retirement.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Appreciate all Elizabeth does for us, and we'll still be calling her for help, but we appreciate that, and hope to see you around. Got a couple more weeks, but this is the last board meeting, and wanted to acknowledge the work that you've done and appreciate what you've given to the kids of our district for the last 17 years.
17 or 18, something like that. Who's counting?
Go.
You can always call me in Florida.
Okay. I'd rather visit.
Yeah.
You can do that too.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Lynn. Anything else?
That's it.
All right. Dr. Johns?
Okay, I'll try and give you the highlights. We already talked about the asbestos abatement, the 3-year asbestos inspection. Just to give you an idea why I went with the company I did. One, the contract with the other company, pretty much all the things that state law allows, they pretty much wrote out of their contract. And I didn't feel like fighting with them for 2 or 3 days to get it the way it needed to be. But I also, with the company that's doing the other consulting on our asbestos abatement, when they first introduced the asbestos testing, if it looked like it had asbestos in it, or if it was suspected of having asbestos, they would just put it in the plan, and then our staff every 6 months have to monitor and go around and check all these items to make sure that it's not friable, it's not, broken, or anything's airborne or whatever. So I like the fact that this company has money built into their proposal to actually go ahead and test some of the items that were suspected of having asbestos but may not. And if we can get those off the list, then it's going to reduce the number of things that our maintenance staff have to, and by our maintenance staff, I'm talking one person, has to check every 6 months when he does a 6-month reinspection. The TRS savings plan, I think I talked about it a little bit at the last meeting. They've kind of realized that maybe they hadn't thought about everything yet, so that March 31st deadline is no longer a March 31st deadline. So we're gonna wait for them to come back with more information. There's just a lot of pieces because they're requiring us to monitor it. But, you know, a lot of our third-party vendors that we use to monitor our 403Bs and our 457s don't have the company that the state's planning to use as even a vendor. So then how are they gonna monitor that when it's not gonna go directly through them, it's gonna go directly through TRS, so there's just a lot of, there also was a question if it's only being offered to TRS members, then are we then going to be subject to ERISA guidelines, which is gonna make more, hoops for us to jump through as far as, compliance. Wednesday, we've got, hopefully 3 companies coming in to give us some, quote, they'll basically come and do a walkthrough with us and then give us quotes on installing Ethernet data drops at both buildings. The E-rate funding will pay for 40% of the cost of that, and then we'll pay the balance out of capital projects. And then we'll also install the 6 projectors that we got through the Title 4 grant, is that which one it was, I think? We're also in the process of getting quotes from fire, fire sprinkler companies for relocating the fire department connection so that if we would lose water supply at the middle school, which this one is at the middle school, then the fire department can hook their pumper truck up to that fire department connection and pump water into the sprinkler system. And where it's at now, there's no way they could, well, there is a way they could do it, but it's gonna be, I can see why they wanted us to move that. So we're in the process of getting that. Just kind of highlighted some things as far as things that we're gonna be looking at as we work on looking at where the budget is gonna be for the end of this year, what changes we're gonna need to make in this year's budget as far as, we'll probably have to do an amended budget this year because there's so many things that we didn't know. Like we didn't know we were gonna have Title I funding at the beginning of the year. We didn't know we were gonna get this additional ESSERS money this year. So there's a lot of pieces that I have a better idea now that we're part of the way through the year. If there's something significant, then we're gonna go ahead and reflect that in in an amended budget. And then also looking, just to give you an idea of some of the things that, some of the revenue that we typically would get that we're not getting, some expenses that we have that we typically wouldn't have, et cetera. So Jason and Carly and I are gonna start working either this week or next week on that 5-year projection. And we'll come up with 2 or 3 different scenarios that then we'll come back and present to you as we look at different staffing models for next year. To give you an idea on water, actually the health department requested a meeting with the companies that provide the equipment to treat our water. And as we had that discussion, I learned a little bit about some other things that we could do that would help eliminate some of the sediment in the water, as well as help with the smell of the water. While, you know, it's not at all harmful currently, it is something that a lot of people are not, you know, they don't like it because it has the sulfur smell. So basically, they're gonna come in and do some water testing, put some proposals and some information together, looking not only at the cost of installing a different type of system, whether it be a charcoal filter that has a backwash system built into it, or whether we look at a green sand filtration system. They both take, there'll be a higher cost to install them, and then there'll also be kind of a monthly, annual kind of a cost that we need to look at, so they're gonna start putting some of those things together so that we can at least look at that. Even though we'd all love to have Lake Michigan water, from everything that I have found out, that probably isn't gonna happen because we would have to be the closest municipality that has Lake Michigan water is Lindenhurst, and as I understand it, in order for us to tap into their water, we have to be part of that. We have to be annexed to Lindenhurst, and currently we're annexed into Old Mill Creek. So somehow we'd have to change that annexation from Old Mill Creek to Lindenhurst, or else Old Mill Creek would need to buy into that. And with the amount of property and the small number of homes, I don't see Old Mill Creek going to that expense. So this may be a solution for us to get similar quality water at probably about I don't know for sure, but it may not cost a whole lot more than it would to pipe and run and connect to Lindenhurst if we had that availability. So as I find out more, I'll let you know. Property tax collection, they're hoping that we'll have our last property tax payment by the end of March. Ordinarily, we would have gotten our last distribution like mid-January. So they're hoping that they'll have something to us by the end of March. So, any questions from anybody?
Thank you, Dr. Jones. Board reports. No board reports. Okay. We do not have a closed session today, so I make a motion that we adjourn.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Have a great night.